Is a economic slowdown and a wave of layoffs coming? Well, based on the headlines, it certainly looks like we're in for a bumpy ride. So let's jump into the news, analyze it, and understand what it might mean for the broader economy. And if you're employed or seeking a new job or just uncertain about your current position, stick around to the end so we can see what you can do to avoid the chaos. With that, let's jump into the layoffs. Layoff announcements surged to the most since the pandemic as Musk DOGE slices federal labor force. 216,000 furloughs in March, part of a 275,000 total reductions in the labor force. And this month total was only surpassed by April and May of 2020, which is obviously not a great time in the early days of the pandemic. And that's because around then, employers announced over 1 million job cuts. Obviously, it's 275,000 jobs is a massive number of people suddenly entering the job market, which has already been super competitive. And while the focus is on federal roles, there is a ripple effect if you think about it. People that go into the office, obviously, not every federal worker was going into the office. That's part of the reason that they're conducting layoffs. But for those that do go into the office and then go to lunch, they're getting lunch at the local deli or something along those lines. There are a lot of jobs downstream of or indirectly connected to these government jobs that are going to take a hit and be overlooked as well. And while the cuts are for DOGE, specifically looking at the government, it is just the beginning. If you work in the public sector, now is probably the time to stay informed about what's happening in your department. Ask yourself, am I a mission critical role? If not, what might you be able to do to reposition or upskill? And it's not just the public sector either. The private sector is also seeing a ton of layoffs. In February of 2025 alone, companies announced over 172,000 job cuts. That is a 245% increase from just the prior few months. Obviously, the hardest hit industries are going to be tech, retail, hospitality. These sectors are particularly vulnerable right now due to the increase in tariffs and shift in consumer behavior. With rising costs and economic uncertainty, people are cutting back on spending, which means fewer jobs in sectors that rely on discretionary income. It is the self-fulfilling prophecy of a recession. Employers start to get concerned about, profits. People stop spending as much because they're worried about recession. People that don't spend as much aren't paying companies as much, so company profits decrease. Companies have to conduct layoffs, which means there's less income to go around. It's really not good. The velocity of money coming to a standstill is part of what happens where recession comes to be. So, getting into some of these private sectors, list of major companies laying off staff this year include Morgan Stanley, Wayfair, Block, and Meta. As we get into more specific numbers, Adidas is planning to cut 500 jobs in Germany. This is global, but obviously the US economy has a major impact on consumer spending in general across the globe. Ally is cutting less than 5% of its workers. That's still roughly 500 employees. Automatic, Tumblr's parent company, is cutting 16% of staff. That's company's website says it's nearly 1,500 employees, so over 150 employees getting cut there. BlackRock is cutting 1% of its workforce. It's got 21,000 employees, so probably about 200 people. And then Block is to lay off nearly 1,000 workers. Blue Origin, laying off about 10% of its employees. Boeing cut 400 roles from its moon rocket program. BP slashes 7,700 staff and contractor positions worldwide. Bridgewater is cutting about 90 staff, 7% reduction. Chevron is slashing up to 20% of its global headcount. CNN is planning to cut 200 jobs. Estee Lauder is cutting as many as 7,000 jobs. Grubhub announced to cut 500 jobs. HPE is laying off 2,500 employees. Johns Hopkins will cut over 2,000 jobs after losing USAID funding. Kohl's is reducing about 10% of its staff. Meta is cutting 5% of its workforce. Microchip Technology slashing 2,000 jobs. Microsoft is making performance-based job cuts in January. Performance-based job cuts are some of my least favorite ways to announce those layoffs because it just labels those people as low performers, making it all the more difficult for them to get a job in the future, especially in this market. Morgan Stanley is planning to cut for the end of March. We should have probably seen those already. This is a little bit of an older article. Porsche's cutting 3,900 jobs over the next few years. Salesforce cutting more than 1,000 jobs. Sonos cuts about 200 jobs. Southwest Airlines announced in February the company's laying off 15% of its corporate staff. Starbucks is laying off 1,100 corporate staff. Stripe laid off 300. Washington Post 4%. Wayfair 340. Workday cuts more than 8% of its workforce. That's fine. Workforce can go out of business. Is your company conducting layoffs? Well, if you've got any information on your company conducting layoffs, you can shout out this person or contact this person to help keep the world informed. Obviously, this is a lot of layoffs, and the wave of layoffs isn't just hitting individual industries. It's part of a larger trend reflecting a deeper crack in the economy. And some economists are projecting that by April of next year, private sector layoffs could hit between 1.5 and 2 million. When you factor in the government layoffs, the total number of job losses could be 1.7 to 2.2 million. That's a significant amount, and it's already a very competitive job market. So if we look at it in terms of CEOs, and like here we've got another headline: Americans brace for summer of layoffs. We've got people bracing for recession. 92% of people are bracing for recession. That is going to feed into the self-fulfilling prophecy of people spend less because they're worried about a recession. And so companies make less. Companies have to fire people. People make less. They can't spend as much. 76 are predicting a increase in layoffs, and 81% are in fear of job cuts. Obviously, if you're working in the government, I would think that's almost 100% at this point in time. But even in the private sector, I would be concerned of layoffs because the economy is not looking great. And don't just take my word for it. Recession is coming before the end of 2025. Generally pessimistic, corporate CFOs say in CNBC survey. As we can see here, which sectors will show the biggest growth over the next 6 months? 40% of CFOs don't know. That is essentially saying 40% of CFOs are predicting we're going to enter a recession. And, what can the Federal Reserve do to prevent a recession? Well, to save the day, the Federal Reserve would have to come in and cut interest rates. But it doesn't look like they're going to do that. Yeah, if they cut interest rates, they're going to make money cheaper, so companies don't have to have as expensive money to invest in projects, in hiring. But at this point in time, with what Jerome Powell just said yesterday, the Federal Reserve, typically they have a dual mandate, which is full-time employment or maximum employment and low inflation, steady inflation, like 2% is what they typically target. Well, right now, the Federal Reserve has paused interest rate cuts, and they're holding steady at 4.25% because they're concerned about tariff inflation. And pretty much yesterday, Jerome Powell came out and said, yeah, I'm going to probably abandon the dual mandate to protect against inflation. Personally, I think this is a major blunder, and I'm not the only one because Trump disagrees as well. Trump escalates a feud with Chair Jerome Powell, saying that his termination cannot come fast enough. Well, if we're thinking about it in terms of what the Federal Reserve cares more about, what's better, inflation or a recession? Recession makes our outstanding government debt more expensive, which is bad. We want inflation for our government debt because it means the money that we owe people is less worth it. It has less buying power, so it's not as important or impactful. So inflation is probably, if you were going to sacrifice one aspect of the dual mandate, it's probably got to be inflation, not the job market, because job market, we enter recession and, things are just going to go bust and it's not going to be good. People are going to lose houses. The FHA just changed the policy, the Biden era policy about, preventing people from losing their home. And it was a few million. I can't remember it exactly, but overall, what can you do? How can you save yourself from this? Well, it's got to be looking at skills. You got to close any skills gaps. You got to make sure you're on top of your game, expanding your professional network, and creating alternative income streams, or if you haven't already, building an emergency fund, emergency savings. So, what are you feeling? Are you anxious about these trends? Do you see opportunities coming from this chaos? What do you think? Please share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And if you made it this far into the video, you may as well subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future videos just like this one. Until next time, thank you.